During this time of the coronavirus, many of you have purchased a firearm for the first time to use for self-defense for yourself and your loved ones. And I believe this was a great decision, not just because of our current circumstances, because I believe having the tools to defend yourself and your loved ones should be commonplace in everyday life. Since many of us are staying home with the coronavirus and everything, I thought I'd make this video to show you new defenders how to use your new firearm safely. These are the 5 universal firearm safety rules. These rules apply to everything in the firearms world, from hunting to competition to the tactical to home defense. These rules help to avoid negligent discharges, accidentally shooting your firearm when you did not mean to, so that you don't accidentally shoot yourself, or worse, others. When these rules are followed, it allows you to have a safe environment in order to train effectively and even to have some fun with your firearms. Now, I also like to mention before we start that this video is not a substitute for quality training with a qualified instructor. This video is a brief overview of the 5 universal safety rules to get you started, so then you can begin to learn the ins and outs of your firearm safely. Let's get into it. Rule number 1, treat every firearm as though it were loaded and always know the condition of your weapon. When you go to pick up a firearm, always assume that it is loaded, so treat it as such. We want to avoid any situation where someone gets hurt because someone thought the gun was unloaded. So until you know the condition of your firearm, always assume it is loaded and ready to go. Now, how do we treat every firearm as though it was loaded? Rule number 2, always point the gun in a safe direction. In case someone fails to follow rule number 1, be sure to point the gun in a direction that is not towards other people, yourself, or any property that would cause significant damage. When you wave the muzzle of the firearm over someone or something, it is called flagging. You do not want to do this. This drives gun owners crazy with new shooters, because it is very easy, especially for pistols, to move the muzzle over someone, or when they're looking at a pistol, they'll do this, and there's a person standing right next to them. This is a no-go. This is not pointing the gun in a safe direction. Why? Because you assume that every firearm is loaded. This also breaks rule number 1, because even if it was unloaded, you point it at your buddy, is that treating the firearm as though it was loaded? Would you point a loaded gun at your buddy? No, you would not. So do not point it at anything you are not willing to destroy. Ask yourself this when you're holding your firearm. If the gun were to go off at that instant, where would the bullet go, and would you be okay with what it would hit? A common phrase that I hear in the gun community is, there is a lawyer attached to every bullet. Because as the gun owner, as the wielder of the weapon, you are responsible for every round that comes out of that firearm. So be sure to point it in a safe direction, always. Rule number 3, finger off the trigger until the decision to fire has been made. Most modern firearms have multiple safety features that prevent them from going off randomly, but this is the ultimate decision maker. The natural resting place for your trigger finger is above the trigger guard, like so. It is not down here, it is right here. This is your trigger finger's home. This is where it lives. It's a nice place. The only time your finger goes on the trigger is when you have your sights aligned on your intended target, and then, and only then, will you put the finger on the trigger to fire. This is the rule that if you follow religiously, it will avoid, I would argue, possibly 90% of the accidental shootings that we have. It is so easy for people, especially new shooters, to just put their finger on the trigger and then it goes off. There are so many internal safeties inside these modern firearms that with a loaded gun, you could literally chuck this across the room in the gravel, in rocks, everything, and it will not go off because it has all these features built inside the firearm. The only way to defeat those safeties for the firearm to go off is if you put your finger on that trigger, which deactivates them when you shoot. So, finger off the trigger until your sights are aligned and you are ready to shoot. Rule number 4, know your target and what is beyond and around it. You need to properly identify your target. If you're hunting deer, make sure you actually see the deer instead of shooting at random noises in bushes or moving shadows in the darkness. This is especially important in a home defense situation. You have to visually identify that it is indeed an actual bad guy in your home instead of a family member up in the middle of the night getting a drink of water. Once you have identified your target, you need to know what is behind it and around it, because if you miss, you're responsible for what that bullet hits after it goes either through or you miss your intended target. Because remember, like we said before, you are responsible for every round that comes out of your firearm. You are responsible for whatever that bullet hits afterwards. So make sure you know your target, what's behind it, and what's around it. Always. Rule number 5. Never load a firearm until it is ready for use. Hunting rifles and range toys, guns you just like to shoot for fun, should only be loaded when you're at the target range to practice or you're actively out hunting. A defensive situation can happen without notice and at any time. Firearms that are being used for personal and home defense should always be loaded and ready to go. Pistols must be in holsters that cover the entire trigger. Rifles and shotguns should be kept in a secure location away from small hands or really smart pets. We'll be delving into this topic in future videos, so be sure to stay tuned for those. There you have it, folks. Memorize these rules and follow them, and you'll be just fine. I'll be coming out with more videos explaining the different types of firearms and how to safely unload and load them, as well as some other good stuff. So be sure to stay tuned, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and hit all so you don't miss those. And until then, I will see you in the next one. Take care, be safe, wash your hands, 20 seconds, all that good stuff. I'm out.